Hi, this is Dana Arcuri, author, speaker, survivor, and advocate. Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to talk about creating healthy boundaries. And this is something that is so essential for all of us. Today I'm going to talk about what boundaries are, what it involves, some tips on creating your own healthy boundaries, and also, I'll be talking a little bit about why sometimes there are some people, especially as children and teenagers, who don't have boundaries, and it is based on their upbringing and lack of being taught healthy boundaries. So let's start first by defining boundaries, because this is a hot topic. We're starting to hear a lot more about it. And it's something I know that I have mentioned countless times on my videos. And so today, let's start with that an effort to understand boundaries, we have to really educate ourselves about what they are not, what it involves, and what that means personally to us. Now, I do believe boundaries are very personal. For everyone, it can look very, very different. So let's start with Wikipedia.com. And this is one of their quotes. They said, "Personal boundaries are guidelines, rules, or limits that a person creates to identify reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for other people to behave towards them and how they will respond when someone passes those limits." Psychology Today says, "An invisible line you draw around yourself to identify what is acceptable behavior is a boundary." So consider it like this line, like a hedge of protection around you, and you get to determine what it consists of and what that means for you, for your relationships, and for many different things involving people, places, and things. Because boundaries, it isn't always just about people. There's so much more involved with this. So let's move on to simple terms of healthy boundaries. So healthy boundaries are a line between you and another person. For each person, this can look very different because we are unique people. Each of us have different personalities, different education, different upbringings, and so our own set of guidelines could be totally different from another person. And we have these certain limits that we permit people or don't permit people to behave a certain way, to act a certain way, to treat us a specific way. And so for those who were raised in a very dysfunctional, toxic family, it may have been one or more parents who were abusive or manipulative, and they may have even been a narcissistic parent, or you could have had toxic siblings. So there's a lot of variables that go into the upbringing and the family dynamics. But for anyone who was raised in a home that was extremely unstable and dysfunctional, you may have experienced parents who would not let you have boundaries. So number one, they did not teach you healthy boundaries, and they also were not a role model for healthy boundaries. So we have to understand that, especially with someone who's sociopathic, someone who is very emotionally unstable, psychologically abusive, narcissistic, they don't respect boundaries. And we have to understand that many children and teenagers grow up in families where they just are not even aware that boundaries are something that they could have. It's typically much, much later in life when these children grow up, have had their boundaries trampled on repeatedly over and over and over. And finally, the light shines bright on the darkness. They awaken to what is all about boundaries, and they understand it, they learn about it, they educate themselves about it, and then they create their own clear set of boundaries. there are various forms of boundaries. So this is new content. I never shared this before. I did a lot of research. I think it's extremely intriguing to discover that there's not just one type of boundary. There are many, many types. And so I'm going to really nail it down, make it crystal clear, especially for those who are new into doing research and educating themselves about healthy relationships, how to handle toxic relationships, and how to create healthy boundaries. So the first one is physical boundaries. This relates to your personal space, your privacy, and your body. For example, some people who may stand too close to you, you know those people, and they just get right up into your face, right up into your face. I mean, hello, social distancing, please. But it's really interesting how there are certain people, like, they don't care about our personal space. And so they get up real close, like their face is very close to ours. It's really uncomfortable, especially now with the whole social distancing thing going on. Real inappropriate behaviors and unsafe. But they cross our boundaries because they get into our safe space. And that is one sign of a physical boundary. Another one, and I think this really needs brought up because I know many people have experienced this, and so have I. So when we may have been a child or even a teenager, we were told by our parent or a relative to hug, Uncle Joe or, Aunt Barbie or whoever. And it could be someone who was either like a distant relative. It may have been someone who lived out of state. It could have been a person, whether it was a neighbor, whether it was a relative, whoever it may have been, that we don't even really know. It might just be someone who kind of just shows up out of nowhere. We're a young child. We're demanded to let this relative hug us and be intimate with us. A hug is intimate, and it's getting into our space. It impacts us and our comfort levels. And so what can happen is when we're being forced to hug that distant relative, we just feel extremely uncomfortable, and it may be scary for a child. So we have to understand that it could cause great distress when someone crosses our physical boundaries. Now, number 2 is emotional boundaries. Now, a lot of times this is what we hear, a lot to do with like mental health boundaries, emotional boundaries. This is probably the most popular one that is discussed, especially on YouTube. And so the emotional boundaries and anything regarding like mental boundaries, it is involving your limits that protect you from manipulation, mistreatment, and being hurt. So an emotional boundary is standing up for yourself, for your safety, for your beliefs, your values, your thoughts, your personal opinions, and for not caving in to someone else who may have a different viewpoint or perspective or experience than you. So it is a healthy expression of our self-respect, self-worth, and dignity when we stand up for our boundaries and we communicate this very clearly in a polite way to those who are in some form of communication with us. This includes strangers, because we know that strangers may communicate with us, especially on social media. So emotional boundaries are essential in many capacities because we have ongoing communication in various ways, whether it's online, whether it's face-to-face, on the job front, in home, at holidays with families and so forth. And this is something that will always, come up in our lives, which is why it's so important to have real clear and healthy emotional boundaries. So one example of someone who crosses your boundary, someone who disrespects you and your boundaries, is when they are gaslighting you and they're bullying you. So this is a clear sign that they're not respecting you nor your boundaries. Next would be financial boundaries, and I think this one is not really talked about a lot. Now, I have seen a few discussions that were really important, especially on Twitter. Now and then there's some really great tweets happening over there in which people call out different things to do with finances, partnerships, marriage, narcissistic abuse, it does involve not respecting the other spouse's financial boundaries. So let's chat a little bit about this. So financial boundaries are how we save money, spend money, give money, donate money, and budget our money. So, it involves a lot. But a lot of times it's not just about our decisions. Really a financial boundary, that's our boundary, people. And we need to stand up for it, even if it is with someone we're related to who has a disagreement on how we spend our own money. A boundary is a boundary regardless what it's pertaining to. But when it comes to money, ooh, no, that's getting to be like a hot button. Sometimes people like to push, you shouldn't be spending your money, and you're a shopaholic. And, there's times people like to slam us and lash out at us for the ways we spend money. And yet it's like, well, why do you care? It's not your money. It's not coming from your bank account. Like, why do you care? So this is something that's sometimes perplexing, why people get on us about how we spend our money or how we give away or donate money. And really, it's nobody's business because it is something personal. So a healthy financial boundary in a marriage, even in a partnership, say you're in a live-in situation, maybe you're living with someone. Now, it could be you're living with a roommate, you're living with a friend, you're living with a sibling, you're living with a new love of your life. It could be anyone. But you're in a relationship where you live together. Now, what can happen is a financial boundary is when the person who you're living with, in whatever capacity that could be, they respect you and your financial boundaries. And both of you have this mutual agreement where you pitch in together and mutually take care of different expenses for, say, utilities, groceries, rent, mortgage, etc., etc. Now, if we're going to talk about some unhealthy financial boundaries, here's an example. Just say your partner or your spouse refuses to let you open up your own banking account. Say you want a checking account, and maybe even you're in a business and your spouse is demanding no, you can't do that. You share my account and we're together in this account and you can't have your own money. And they start screaming and yelling and stomping and having their little hissy fit. You know what I'm talking about, those temper tantrums that narcissistic people and toxic people have. And when it's pertaining to money, it can get really ugly. There could be full-blown fights and quarrels and conflicts and disagreements, and it could be just like never ending. Because when someone disrespects your financial boundary, it is really uncomfortable and it is very, very unhealthy. Next is something that I think out of anything that needs talked about in regards to healthy boundaries, it would be online boundaries. So I'm going to first ask you a question. Have you ever considered creating boundaries for social media, for text messaging, for emails, and for long distance relationships, meaning you're not face to face, you may have interactions with someone, say on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. Do you have healthy boundaries online? Because this is something that is vital and healthy and very necessary. So let's chat about it. Online boundaries are important for social media, for emails, text messages, or anything pertaining to the internet. It seems like nobody talks about this subject, and that's why I'm talking about it today, because we need to shed the light and educate about healthy online boundaries. How many of us are being silenced online? We're being censored, we're being bullied, stalked, mobbed, verbally attacked online. Maybe you're dealing with smear campaigns, retaliation from the toxic siblings or narcissist. And, this is all about boundaries, people. So when someone's lashing out at you, and it can even be a stranger, because let's keep it real now, we have all experienced a stranger who does not know us, they don't know anything about us, or they barely know anything about us, and yet they think they know it all, and they start screaming, lashing, and of course, the screaming's coming across with a lot of explanation points, on their remarks that they have to. So whether it is someone like private messaging you on Facebook or someone who's commenting on your Instagram, the point is we really need to have these clear, healthy ways of communicating with people, and these boundaries are in place to protect us online, especially from bullies, narcissists, haters, and very toxic people. Next would be, now this is just a little bit about my own personal boundaries online. So I do have online boundaries, and the big boundary for me, and this is across the board everywhere on the internet. So whether I'm on a forum chatting with people, and mind you, they're probably strangers, or I'm on Twitter, or back in the day when I was on Facebook, and even when I'm on YouTube, what I do is, if someone says something that's very derogative, extremely mean-spirited, cruel, vindictive, manipulative, hateful speech, I don't engage. So I have a rule, and my rule is my limit. And remember, this is a personal boundary. Everybody has personal boundaries, including with online. So for me, I don't have time for the BS with conflicts on social media or the internet. If someone disagrees with me, hey, everybody has the right to agree to disagree. Hey, let's do it peacefully. Unfortunately, these peaceful disagreements are rare, because a lot of people, they want to get in your face, and it's more so get in your face on social media, where they won't stop. Have you ever had that happen on social media where someone's kind of going back and forth with you? You're trying to be polite and maybe you don't engage, but they just keep going and like comment. And you could tell by the way they're wording the remarks and how they're commenting, especially if they put everything in all caps, if they're swearing at you. They're overstepping your boundaries on the internet, these online boundaries. And so again, for me, what I do is, I don't engage. I'm not going to react. Once again, a narcissist wants narc supply. They want you to overreact and have a meltdown and, start fighting back. So I don't. What I do is I report them, I block them, and I keep on keeping on, because life is too short to get caught up in the craziness of online gaslighting, manipulation, bullying, etc., etc. Next would be something else that we don't talk about, and I know it's personal because now we're going to talk about sex. Yes, that's right. We're going to talk about sexual boundaries. And the reason why I really believe that it's essential to have a little chat on intimacy is because we don't normally talk about it. And it needs to be something out for us to examine, for us to understand, to educate ourselves, and to understand, consent. There's a lot about sexual consent, saying yes or saying no, and that you have the right in your sexual boundaries to have limits. It's really important for your body, that you have limits. And we're going to talk about that. So sexual boundaries means that you have the specific rules pertaining to your comfort level around physical touch, kissing, even handshaking and hugging and intimacy and sexual behaviors. An example of someone crossing your boundary, as in sexual boundaries, is when you meet someone new, and let's just say you met someone on social media, and it's the opposite sex. And in some cases, it could be the same sex. So let's kind of keep it wide open for any gender and all genders. So you meet someone via online, and before you know it, they send you a private message, and they're asking you to send them a nude picture of yourself. Now, number one, you don't know them. Number two, like, what the hell? No. This is so inappropriate. There is a red flag, like, screaming for your help, screaming for your attention, telling you, like, wake up, like, block this person, report this person. For all you know, it's a predator, it's a rapist, or it's someone who is treating you like a piece of meat, and all you are is an object of pleasure for them. And no, hell no, we're not going to do that. And another thing is, on social media, there's a lot of women who are talking about these men who they don't know or they barely know, who are asking them, hey, can I send you a nude picture of myself? Like, do men really think women want to see this? Because if they do, they are so freaking lost. Like, no, we don't want to see your junk. And this is very creepy, it's predatory, and it's very, very toxic and abusive. So if this happens to you and someone either A, asks you to send a nude picture of yourself or private parts or what have you, or B, they just all, without even asking you, send very graphic X-rated pictures to you, any form of pornography to you, report them and block them. Don't hesitate to build solid sexual boundaries for yourself, because it is for your own safety, my friend. Next would be spiritual boundaries. So now we're going to talk a little bit about religion, because this involves spiritual boundaries. And so we need to be real clear about a few things. So number one, each person has their own personal beliefs about religion. Some people are not religious at all. Other people do practice religion, and everyone comes from a very, very different, unique background. So we have to understand that, yes, there could be a lot of different opinions, beliefs, even educational backgrounds on various forms of spirituality and religion. Next would be, some folks do believe in God, or they'll talk about Jesus, whereas other people will say that's not their belief system, and they more so believe in a higher power, or they might talk about a creator or what have you. So again, when we're talking about religion and spirituality, I think religion, number one, organized religion is like completely different than spirituality. Totally two different topics. Maybe for another day we could talk about that into another video. But I think religion is a topic, again, just like politics is like, ooh, no, don't talk about it. And yet here, everybody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about politics, and a lot of people talk about religion. And it's a topic that we're told not to discuss. And yet, I do believe it's important to talk about boundaries. But we have to keep an open mind. Not everyone believes what you believe. Not everybody believes what I believe. And guess what? That's okay. We live in a world, we live in this wonderful, beautiful universe where we all come from very different backgrounds and experiences. And that's the beauty, that we're all different. We can learn from each other and we can respect each other, even if we don't have the same faith or the same belief. Now, the one thing is really important to talk about, and that is, that is when people are crossing our spiritual boundaries. So the problem is religious gaslighting. Different things with someone who either A, has a very, very different opinion than you, a different belief system than you. It could be night and day from yours. And again, that's fine. The problem is when someone starts projecting their junk onto you, meaning they're angry at your belief system and they tell you that you are wrong. No, who's to say who's wrong? Just because one person believes one thing, they should not disregard and discredit another person for their belief system. That is the beauty of free will. Free will is that we have the opportunity to choose our own spiritual boundaries, beliefs, values, etc., etc., etc. And it is personal and it's nobody else's business. It's none of their business what you believe. However, what I've noticed, especially online, is that there's a lot of religious gaslighting. And that's when people use God or scriptures or the Bible as a weapon to hurt you, condemn you, harshly judge you, discredit you, ostracize you, and call you horrible, horrible names such as you're going to go to hell for such and such, and on and on and on they go. It's nobody's place to judge. Nobody's place to judge, especially when it comes to spirituality. I think spirituality, again, is very different than religion. But, hey, you believe what you believe, let them believe what they believe, and let's all just keep it respectful and polite. Next is we're going to talk about common reasons for unhealthy boundaries. Number one, you may have been taught to not have boundaries. So really what it is, it's not like someone said, no, you can't have boundaries. It was simply that you were raised in an environment that was so toxic and dysfunctional and unhealthy and unsafe, and it may have been abusive, in which your parent was not a role model and they did not teach you boundaries. So your needs and your wants may have been ignored, minimized, ridiculed, denied, and you were told that you just had to bow down to this parent and whatever their wishes are. You could also be a people pleaser. So one reason why people don't have healthy boundaries, or just zip, zero, nada, no boundaries whatsoever, is because they are a people pleaser. So this type of person who's people pleasing, they live in fear. So fear is the root of being a people pleaser. They don't want to offend anyone or ruffle any feathers, and they just go with the flow. A people pleaser is a follower. They are not a leader. Next, this person who might not build a boundary might actually be scared to stand up for their self and their own opinion, and they may just stay quiet, kind of just bow down to everybody else's demands and ideas and perspective and opinions and keep quiet. Another reason someone may never have built healthy boundaries is because they were raised by, the abusive caregiver or parent. And it could be that it was a sibling. So for some people, they had toxic siblings who were bullying them and who wanted to get their own way. Now, this is really, really important to know that if you are the youngest child, the whole thing with birth order, it's very common for the youngest child, the baby in the family, to be pushed around and for their boundaries to be trampled on and to have no respect from their family members. So a lot of times the youngest person in the family could be the black sheep in the family. They could be the scapegoat. However, this is not always the case. The birth order technically could be any which way. You're the oldest, you're the only child, you're the middle child, you're the youngest child. I just see that it's a lot more common for the youngest child to be attacked more frequently because they are so young, they become easy prey for toxic siblings and narcissistic parents. Here are some tips for you today, my friend, for you to create clear, healthy boundaries for you in your relationships. Number one, educate yourself about healthy boundaries, what they are not. Number two, determine what your limits are for yourself as well as for your relationships, including online. Number three, be aware of the signs when someone crosses your limits and breaks your rules for boundaries. Number four, learn to bravely speak up if someone oversteps your boundaries. Number five, it is perfectly fine to say no to someone who is not in alignment with your boundaries, with your morals, your values, your opinions, your lifestyle, your belief system, etc., etc. Number six, do not feel guilty for creating healthy boundaries. There is nothing to be ashamed of or feel guilty about. Your healthy boundaries and maintaining them is for your own protection, safety, and peace of mind. Number 7, be clear when you ask for what you need and what you want or what you don't tolerate in regards to your boundaries. And number 8, seek emotional support. Number 9, to express your authentic emotions, even if you disagree with someone or when you have your own unique perspective. Understand that not everyone will respect your boundaries, and you do have permission to show them to the door. Adios, amigo. Next, number 10, this is the last tip. Trust your gut instincts. Your intuition never lies. You have body signals that are alerting you to potential danger. Take heed. Listen to that soft voice within you that guides you to safety. And lastly, understand that creating healthy boundaries is your superpower. Woo woo. It is. It's a superpower. I stand by it. I believe in it. Talk to me today. Tell me, my friends, when you were a child or teenager, did you get taught healthy boundaries? Or were there problems? Did people trample all over your boundaries? Did you finally create boundaries as an adult? Share your experiences with me. I'd love to hear more. Thank you and have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.